Hi, everybody. I'll let you all settle in and get set. I'm John Schwabish. Thanks for coming to this first co-video chat. Nigel Holmes here with me.
Hello.
Hi, Nigel. This is thanks for coming. This is gonna be pretty low key. Hopefully, some people are able to bring their kids. I see that my mom is here, so hopefully you are able to join us and participate. So Nigel and I are going to talk to us for a little bit, and then we'll just open it up for questions, and I'll unmute you, and you can ask your own questions. So maybe Nigel, we should start for folks who aren't familiar with your work, which would be surprising for those who are here. But maybe just a quick background on who you are and what you've worked on, and
Sure.
Maybe what you're doing right now in this odd time.
Well, as you can see from the picture, I'm an old guy. I'm much older than John, and so I've been doing this kind of thing for a long time. Information graphics, from Time magazine, and before that in England for the BBC. And since 1994, I've been working for myself. So I am pleasantly self-quarantined. I haven't seen anybody since 1994, and seldom go outside, except to the house. This is a separate building here. And a lot of the things that I've done have been not specifically for children, but for adults who don't know about a subject. And I don't think which might be a complicated subject like finance or medical stuff. And I don't see much difference actually between doing work for children and doing work for people who don't know about the subject, whatever the subject is. And so I have a very simple, usually simple, clear, I hope, pictorial kind of approach to things. I like pictures. And so I'm hoping that if there are any children watching, you and I, John, can kind of excite them about this field.
Yeah.
And there are some simple things that we can all do. I went to see some of Erin, my wife's family, and there were a couple of kids there, and it was very cold, and we were indoors, and it was in Colorado. And the snow was so deep, you couldn't do anything. You couldn't go outside. It was crazy. So one day I sat down with the two kids and everybody else, and there were about 10 of us there. And I said, let's do a family tree. And so I scribbled in my little notebook, which I think you've got there, John, the family tree. It looks like this.
I'll bring this up.
And it's kind of a hopeless mess, but you can see I started at the top and just said, so who's your granddad? And then how many children did he have? And so I don't know if this works on here. Does this work? Can you see my arrow going across here, or is that only on?
No, just on mine.
Just on yours. Okay.
Yep.
So I mean, it was a fun thing to do, and a whole lot of people. It turned out that a whole lot of people didn't know some of their relations. Even the family who was there, who are the ones who were there, were kind of roughly in the middle of this picture here, and some, there were some kind of clear family differences, and some little notes about nicknames and so on, and why Donald up at the top, who is the grandfather, was called Peter because he had big ears, because so he's called Peter Rabbit, and I mean, things like that. And what I intend to do is to actually make this into something and send it to everybody and say, what do you think of this? Could you do this any better? I mean, specifically to the two children who were there, who were 15 and 10. So a nice age. They're the two at the bottom here, Megan and Lily. And they, it held their interest for, I would say, a good hour, just
Huh.
doing this and plotting it out. Let's get rid of that now and look at yourself again, John.
Okay.
Hi, Yuri, I see you there.
There's Yuri.
So, you know, I think that, especially at a time like this, where we're all kind of cooped up together, just to sit down with any old piece of paper, it doesn't matter where you start, it doesn't matter how much mess there is, it doesn't matter how many times you cross things out and start again, or just start the whole thing again because you didn't leave enough space at the bottom or at the side, or somebody had lots of children and they had a lot of children. You have to work it out. But it's a very good kind of way to organize things and to learn about your own family.
Mm-hmm.
So the other thing I sent you
Yeah.
was a crazy idea I had this morning as I was in the kitchen, which was, I sent you these potatoes, and I thought, you know, an interesting thing to do might be, since we are always talking about how big something is compared to something else,
Mm-hmm.
would be a kind of a cooking thing, which will end up with mashed potatoes, I think. But you cut the small one into 4 pieces and put them aside, and then cut all the other ones into the same size piece, but keep them separate, so that the second one, the red one, the second one down there, will maybe would have 4 of, well, it would certainly have 4, but maybe 5 or 6 pieces, which were the same size as the one that you cut the first one into, and then so on up. And you'll see at the end how much bigger in units the big potato is than the small one, which is 4. Or you could use that one and try to make them all, you know, maybe cut the red one in half and count that as 2. I mean, you don't have to be that exact. But I think the idea is to see quantities. This is for children.
Yeah.
And also it gets you into the kitchen, which is a good place to be, helping your parents cook, whether the mother or the father does the cooking. I actually do most of the cooking in the house. And then you make a nice mashed potato at the end of it, you know, and if you add a little parsnip to the mashed potato, a little onion, a little cream, a little butter, mix it up nicely, and you've done some visualization at the same time as cooking.
Do you think it's worth sticking to just the visualization part and not like and not moving on beyond that? Because I can see, for example, you could easily do conversion of measurement, or you could do, you know, once you have it in all these units, you could do all sorts of different types of math. But do you think it's worth just, you know, especially when we're all cooped up all the time, to just stick to this one piece, this one element of communication?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you know, this is something that's going to go brown and nasty. So eventually you have to use it. But you can, I mean, there are lots of things in the kitchen that you could do this with. You know, lots of things that have units. I just thought it would be nice to look at something whole, the big potato versus the small one, and say, I wonder how much bigger that is than the other one. Not just it's big, it's a lot bigger, but actually to cut it up into pieces and really try to, it's kind of pseudo-scientific, but it would be fun, I think, and it would actually be a great teaching tool. I mean, I'm going to do it. I'm going to cut the big potato up and see how many of the small ones I've got here, and kind of think about that.
Yeah. So I'm going to see if I don't see any questions yet in the chat box, but folks should feel free to start putting questions in there, raising their hands. I thought we would talk just a little bit longer, Nigel, and then we'll see what questions there are out there. Yep. You obviously do a lot of drawing, a lot of sketching, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit, especially if we have younger folks in the crowd, about your process when it comes to your design efforts. You know, how do you work? How do you develop the different types of illustrations and so on and so forth?
Yeah, well, you have this book there,
Yeah,
I think.
sure do.
In that book, let's see if you can turn that to page 38. Looks like this.
Yeah.
I went back to my sketchbook, and I put everything into little books like this. This is number 62 from 7th July the 8th, 16 to October 16. So it's a sketchbook that has all sorts of stuff in it. But I found the beginning sketches for this piece, which are just, they're very rough and they're very messy, and there's a whole lot of words going on. So what I do, because the book ends up being words and pictures that are completely kind of connected together, and I write the thing and draw the thing at exactly the same time. I mean, one gets on top of another, and a lot of the stuff in the sketching, a lot of the sketching is actually writing down what I'm trying to say, because if I can say it clearly, then the drawing just comes naturally, and and the drawings are actually very, very simple in this book. They're practically stick figures, a lot of them. They're not, it's not art, it is design, and the people are designed in the same way that charts are designed. I mean, when I was at Time magazine, I used to say there wasn't much difference between drawing, because it was all drawn by hand then, between drawing a bar and drawing a person that was a bar. Of course, that all sorts of mistakes that people make these days, like making the person much bigger than the other thing, and like it's this problem, you know.
Right.
But I find that sketching is very important and drawing is important, but it's not as important as the sketching, because you're working things out when you're sketching. And writing is sketching as well. Writing is writing a sketch of what you're going to actually finally put into print. And the best information graphics for me, this is kind of an adult thing really, but it is a true marriage of the words and the pictures. The two things go together and they don't exist without each other. And I insist on doing that. So all the books that I've done, this one and a couple before this, I send complete spreads. Draw it from the front because it's just a big blob with some kind of line that wouldn't be visible because it's a silhouette. So you draw it from the side, and all sorts of a teapot from the side, not from 3/4 up, or you know, or in a car, the same thing. What was the name of the Peter? What was his last name?
Oh, Cheney is the last name. So Peter Cheney.
Jenny. Okay. Yeah. You know, there's another person who was a bit like that. Emberley, Ed Emberley. Does this ring with you? This is Ed Emberley's Make a Word drawing book, and these are things that you can draw very simply. Am I showing it in the right place? Yeah. And I see from the back here that he's done faces, animals, pictures, tricks and trains. But I love this because this is a beautiful way for people to learn how to draw, but also it ends up with the nicest little icons that you can imagine. I mean, they're absolutely beautiful. I've not exactly ripped this off in the way that I ripped off Gerd Ernst, but which by the way is an homage to Gerd Ernst, not a rip-off. It is for all of us, I think. Anyway, yeah. Thank you for Peter, Jenny.
Oh yeah.
Sorry about that, Nigel. We lost power here for a second. So.
Oh, okay.
Well, I'm glad Robert was able to come
Fill
back
in.
in.
Yes.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I wanted to see if there were any kids out there who wanted to ask any questions, and if not, my daughter had one. She's out in the back gardening. So I showed her your book this morning, which we've already read, but she wanted to know why you decided to write this particular book.
Well, because, okay. The genesis for the book really was the hot dog eating contest, the Coney Island hot dog eating contest, which actually was one of the few things that I went to. It's on page 26 here, and this is a classic. Right, this is a classic unit chart from and also about food that Robert was just talking about. This is the number. This is a picture of the number of hot dogs that one person eats in 10 minutes, dog and bun, and it is a truly awful thing to watch. Because he does this live in Coney Island every July the 4th. It'd be interesting if they do it again this year. But I've always been fascinated by this and by the Japanese. There was a Japanese guy who consistently won, and Takeru Kobayashi was the guy, and he had a particular regimen for how he trained for this, like an athlete. He got his stomach going, as it were. And so that and a few other things, especially in England, kind of had always fascinated me. Rolling cheese down a hill is a big deal in England, and dangerous. And so I was friends with an editor at Taschen who published this book, and I said to him very casually, "Do you think there's a book in this?" And he said, "Well, send me 10 and I'll take it to the head of Taschen." And to my amazement, they came back and said, "Yeah, you do this, but we want 100." So I said, "Okay, I'll see if I can find 100." And you know what? Within 10 minutes, I could find 200. You go on the internet and just say weird competitions or weird rituals, and it's all there. This was the easiest book to find the stuff for. Now, it all had to be checked and checked out, and are they still running, and but it was a great opportunity for me, to do all sorts of things, turn the thing on its side like this, and I don't know, just go, this is a particular favorite of mine. This is a ridiculous event in England. I mean, I could have done a whole book about England. So why did I do the book? What's your daughter's name?
Ellie.
Ellie. So Ellie, the reason I did this is because I like having fun when I do things. And this was a great deal of fun. It was a lot of work, but it was a great deal of fun. If you want to go into having fun making books, you won't make any money, Ellie, by the way. But it's still fun. And one of the deals that I got was that Taschen gives 100 books to its or maybe they weren't paying me enough and they said we better give them 100 books or something. So I was able to give these to lots of people, and people love it. I mean, they laugh. I think a lot of them have probably got them in their bathrooms, you know, but I don't care where you read it.
Right.
And I like it. Now, from a kind of more serious point of view, the way I put it together was to make a list of what I thought was available. They wanted it to be as worldwide as possible. So we struggled to find events in some parts of the world. There's not a single one in France for some reason. Lots in Spain, a lot in Spain. And if you're in Spain now, I feel very sorry for you. And few in Italy, and I also feel sorry for you. And hello, Oliver and Ali and Roland and Fia, if you are watching. And lots in England. I could do a whole book about England, a whole book about Spain. But basically, it was just a fun project to do.
Great.
And all right.
So RJ Andrews is here, and he had a question for you. So I'm just going to let him. I'll just let him chat with you here.
Okay.
There we go.
Hey, Nigel.
Hello.
So thinking about explaining abstract ideas to children and also lots of adults, have you ever encountered ways beyond the maybe doubling of the rice on the chessboard to explain exponential changes and exponential curves? We seem to be in a moment where understanding exponential changes is very important. Have you seen any very clever ways of communicating exponential change?
Have you seen the thing I did on doubling on a chessboard?
I don't have it in my mind's eye right now. If I have seen it.
Okay. I mean, that's a good way to show it. And as you know, I like pictures. The trouble at the moment is that there's no fun in this at all. This cannot be made fun of in the slightest, and shouldn't be. I'm not a statistician. I'm not a mathematician. I'm not really one of you guys. I mean, I trained as an illustrator, and I use what I can as far as math is concerned, but I try to keep it within the limits that I know how to deal with. So, I mean, exponential, I'm not even sure, it means kind of sudden, quick, changes, right? I mean, changes all of a sudden. Is that what exponential means? Is that a definition of exponential?
I think that's close enough.
Close enough.
You know,
Yeah, I mean, I've tried to show things that children might be interested in, which is, you know, the differences between a million, a billion, and a trillion, for instance, which are amazing. I mean, if you kind of draw a plan in your head of 3 points in time, and let's count, you know, a million seconds, a billion seconds, and a trillion seconds. Forgive me, anybody who's heard me ever do this. And a million seconds is about 12 days ago. A billion seconds is 32 years ago. But a trillion seconds is 3 more zeros, 32,000 years ago. So you have a million and a billion, which on a scale would be practically on top of each other, and then a great long spread before you get to 32,000. So it's like today and the time when the first art was being made. and 32 years ago is whatever it is. I can't do it in my head, but it's not that long ago. I mean, how old are you, RJ? You 32?
A little bit older.
But I mean, when I do it, I say, you know, is anybody 32 in the audience? And we sing happy billion to you. That number of
Thank
seconds.
you.
So that kind of thing is what I'm interested in explaining. I can't say, yes, I've come at a clever way of explaining things that happen quickly. I mean, I look at Alberto trying to, you know, toggle between a logarithmic and a linear scale. And I mean, I personally, I don't like logarithmic scales because I like what things look like, and that's not what it looks like. So I would rather extend off the edge of the paper onto the wall than do a logarithmic scale. But of course, you can't do that. You can't do that when you are restricted by a space that you've been given to work within. But to me, it's anti-intuitive, or always has been. If you have to explain something about the scale, for goodness sake, then you've not explained what the problem is. It's a way of crunching things into a space because you've only got that much space. I'm sure people are going to ram me off the wall for that, but I don't care. Yuri's not laughing.
Does anyone else have any other questions out there? I mean, we don't need to. I mean, RJ, I'm sure you have more questions. You know, Yuri, Robert, anything else? I mean, I think there is something. I think there is a log scale discussion to be had, and maybe it's not right now, but there's certainly one of the, I don't know, 2 or 3 most popular graphs out there right now about COVID is from the Financial Times. John Murdoch is making, and you know, that's all in log scale, and I agree, it's sort of hard for people, probably many people, to understand what those mean, but you get this shape that you can recognize, and of course John is great at annotation, so I think it's an ongoing, you know, design and information visualization question.
I mean, I think labels and explaining things we should not shy away from. You know, there should be a headline, it should be up at the top. You know, we read from left to right, so that's the way things should go. Subhead underneath it. I mean, this was all drilled into me at Time magazine by actually, it wasn't drilled into me by Walter Bernard. He just laid it out the way he thought things should be without really thinking about it. I mean, he hired me because he wasn't interested in doing information graphics himself, but he was a great mentor and champion and so on, and allowed me to do some things which, of course, certain academic people have vomited over. But you know, that's long in the past. You know, I think for kids, apart from doing a family tree, there are all sorts of things that you could do. I mean, another favorite of mine to demonstrate when I do lectures is the enormous length that people jump. So I think if you can measure out somewhere in your house, or if you can go outside, if you can measure 29 feet, you know, count it out, measure it out. And actually, you saw me do this at one of Robert's things, right?
Yeah, Robert,
the tableau thing.
Yeah.
But it's extraordinary that a human being can jump that far. You don't understand it until you actually measure it out. So you might have to use, if you're stuck indoors, you might have to go down a corridor or go from one room to another. And then imagine somebody taking off at one end and not hitting the ground until they land 29 feet further on.
Yeah.
So that's not a big number, but it's a kind of extraordinary number. You know, numbers are great. I love them.
Yeah, they have downtown here in DC at the Air and Space Museum, they have these little pillars for different planets.
Yeah.
And they have them lined up, and you know, you end up having to look all the way down the mall to see where where Jupiter is going to be.
Right. That's exactly the same kind of thing. But I mean, you could do a long time ago. Chronicle Books asked me to do a book. It didn't go anywhere. I would have liked to have done it. But one of the things I did was to draw a chart about your family. And it was, you know, I said, you know, first of all, gather information. So this is data collection. And then what are you going to do with this? Well, one of it, what I proposed here was how fast people run in the family. And so you have a course, you measure out how fast it runs, and there's a dog and a 14-year-old and a granny at the end. And you give each of them, you time them, how long they're going to run, and then you draw a chart of how long they run. The dog won, actually, yeah, the dog was the fastest. But, you know, things like that introduce kids to the idea of collecting data and then doing something with the data and then drawing the scale. And to begin with, the scale was kind of the wrong way around because it looked like Granny had won, whereas Granny came last. So you change the scale, you kind of alter it around. And that kind of activity, I think, is a great kind of teaching tool for kids. It's kind of fun to do. It's always got to be fun.
Right.
I think, you know, you've got to.
Yeah.
And I believe that actually with adults too. I mean, I'm grossly criticized, not for making fun, but for bringing humor into things. And I'm always rattling on about it, saying, I think people will understand something better if they kind of smile first, you know.
Yeah.
And it's not a smile of humor, it's a smile of recognition. Oh, now I see what you're getting at.
Yeah. The one that I've done, and I'll just share this, I've done with my kids at their school actually, is one where I ask them to draw, you know, I'll go to their classroom and I'll ask them to draw a map of one of the floors in their house.
Yes.
And then, so they'll draw the floor, and then I'll say, okay, so now I'll give them a piece of tracing paper, put this on top and start adding some data to it. So they'll do, you know, they'll add bubbles for where they spend their time, or, you know, this sort of thing. And it's fun, I think, in a different kind of way, because it's very personal.
Yeah.
And they can relate to it. And then, you know, then they see things about themselves and their families. And, you know, I've heard Valentina De Filippo, who does a version of this with adults, where she'll have them draw a map of the world. And you know, she once told me that it's interesting how people who are born and grow up in different areas of the world, the center of their map differs.
Yeah.
Right. So the center of my map is going to be the United States. The center of somebody else's map is going to be the UK or China or what have you. So there's all these sorts of drawing exercises, I think, that people can do.
Yeah, I mean, I think coming from Europe, I have the best of those, because Europe is always in the middle of the map, because it's awkward. If you center America on the map, there's bits missing. There's a whole lot of Pacific Ocean there. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, go to this one because it's the same thing. This is my granddaughter Sophia, who plotted out her middle school playground. Yeah, if you can't get to it,
I have it somewhere here.
It's okay. And it's a kind of a crazy diagram, but it's actually full of a lot of very interesting information. Let me just hold it up. Don't worry about it. Here.
Okay. Oh, here I
Um,
go. I got it.
Yep. Yep.
Give me 1 second. I got it right here.
Okay.
There we go.
She drew a picture of John. Oh no. Okay. So, yeah. So this is obviously it's slightly a work in progress, but I mean it's got wonderful kind of annotation, like where the teachers were, and I love the annoying, despite the spelling, I love the annoying girls, and it's, you know, I think she was 14 when she did this, 15 now, or maybe 13. And it's actually very sophisticated, you know. I mean, because, and it looks crazy, but I mean, you know, it's a school playground, for goodness sake. So it actually represents that beautifully, I think.
Yeah.
And you know, she didn't quite have enough paper, so she added a piece of paper to the bottom, and you know, so there was some movements, had whiteout on it, and special friends, Emu and Rory, presumably, and the named girls. The 3A girls, I wasn't quite sure where they appeared. They looked like olives on a stick in the key there. But I mean, this is a wonderful thing about being a parent or a grandparent. You know, I just got this in the mail, and her mother, Alessandra, just sent it to me. You know, and I mean, a couple of years ago, it was so nice to see that they are natural information designers. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
When given a little push, I think, and you obviously did the same thing for your daughter, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a little encouragement. I think that's right.
Yeah.
So let me see. I don't know if there's any other questions. I think people like that. So I'll just ask this one, and then maybe we'll just finish up if there are no questions.
Sure.
You've been working at home now for a long time.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations for those of us who are having to jump into this working from home and social separation now for maybe the first time?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm lucky enough this is a separate little building. I'm in what was, you know, a shed at the bottom of the garden, basically. So I actually, if it's snowing or raining or cold, I actually have to put clothes on. And I'm wearing clothes now, even down below where you can see. That makes a huge difference. We do not have a single computer in the house. Everything is here. And I think that's a big thing. I've always done that. I used to work from home in England, and it got hopelessly messed up with life at home. And, you know, I was in a bedroom, and I don't know, it didn't quite work. Now, I know this is difficult because people don't necessarily have a separate dwelling to go to on the same property. But you've got to make a difference between work and not work. Otherwise, they will creep together. And this wretched machine that we all have is trying to do that to us all the time. And I'm the same as everybody. I'm completely addicted to it, and I can't stop looking at Twitter and seeing what RJ is saying, or what Robert is saying, or what you are saying. So separation is the thing. Get up, get dressed, go somewhere where it's shut off, close the door, put a note on the door that says, Daddy is working, or I am working, or Boo Boo is working, or whatever the nickname is. And come out only at the kind of times that you would come out when you were at work.
Yeah.
In other words, you know, to have a pee or to have a cup of coffee or something, but don't kind of wander around. I think you have to pretend. No, you don't have to pretend. You have to be at work.
Yeah.
And as I say, I've made it easy for myself because I'm in a separate building.
space.
It's very small. I mean, it's 300 square feet. It's not a big deal.
Right.
But it's you know, I've got nice bookshelves and I've got everything
Right.
that I need here, and nothing goes into the house.
Right. Well, if no one has any other questions, I don't see anything in the chat box. If anyone wants to raise their hand or yell out in the chat box, I'll give you another second here. Otherwise, there's no need to continue our meeting. It's always good to give people an extra 15 minutes back to their lives. So Nigel, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for coming on and chatting with everybody. I'll just let everybody know I'm going to try to keep doing these as long as I can. There's a question about whether it's recorded. Yes, it's recorded. And I'll try to post that soon. I'm going to do another one of these tomorrow with Anne Ennemery, who is another person in the data visualization space. Anne does a lot of webcasting and digital work, so we'll be talking about some of that and talking about making reports look really nice. That'll be at 1 o'clock Eastern, and the Zoom link will be on my website. And yeah, so tune back in, bring your kids. I hope everybody stays safe and healthy. And thanks again, Nigel. This was a lot of fun. This was great. Great to see you.
Well, thanks, John. I'm sure you'll have a lot more people tuning in when there's a real data visualization person talking to them. As opposed to the pseudo one.
We'll see. This was great. This was great.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Take
Thank
care.
you, Nigel.
Okay. Bye. Bye. Bye.